Pleasure to introduce our presenters this evening. Michelle Simon is Boone County's Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources Education. And she was raised on a farm down in Grantsville, Kentucky. Her family raised commercial beef, poultry, vegetables, and fruits. She was involved in the Campbell County Saddle Up Club with 4-H. Her involvement with 4-H and her interest in raising livestock led her to the College of Agriculture down at UK. And throughout her college career, she became involved with extracurricular organizations including Block and Bridle, Dairy Club, Agribusiness Club. I just think that's amazing. When we were in high school, girls weren't allowed in that.
Hopefully that changed.
She's also an ambassador for the College of Agriculture, and she graduated in 2010 with a bachelor's degree in animal science, and then started her career with the co-op. The Cooperative Extension of Agriculture and Natural Resources down in Scott County is where she started out, and we're really glad that she's come up to Boone County to work with us. Michelle Simon and her buddy, John Brady Walton.
John always has stuff to talk about. Don't let him fool you. Well, thanks for the invitation tonight. I really appreciate it. So, well, she pretty well covered the background on there. I don't have as many ties to Boone County as you all probably do, but I do have some. My sister's lived over here since she married her husband. I don't know if many in this crowd know Phil Rollins or not, but that was her father-in-law. So Boone County's always been near and dear growing up, and I got to come back home when I transferred here. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity. I guess John wants to do his introduction. So when he's doing that, I'm going to load my PowerPoint on here. So I'll let you take it from there, John.
Okay. I don't doubt about it, Mike. Most everybody can hear me from here. Well, one more thing on her resume is that she has a master's in agronomy.
I do.
And so
Well,
that,
crop science, technically. But crop science.
Well,
technically.
yeah, well, agronomy was when I was there anyhow. I'm also a UK graduate, much older than that. So anyhow, and yes, the Block and Bridle and the 4-H clubs and all that were those extracurricular activities that we enjoyed. And Block and Bridle, we put on a show in the spring to entertain, I don't know who, but we did entertain a bunch of people. So anyhow, the other part of this story is that I'm most proud of is the fact that a year ago, February, I was at the Bluegrass Stockyards at Lexington. Just happened to stop in there to see it. Actually, it was a bull sale. And got to talking to this young lady. Come to find out that she had mighty good credentials as far as I was concerned there. And we had, as the ag department at here, we had posted the need for an ag agent. And in our conversation, I told her that was what we were needing, an ag agent. And to my surprise, she said, I believe I'd like to come to Boone County. Of course, as you've already heard, the connection with the Phil Rollins, he was my principal when I taught at Conner Junior High School. Phil was a mighty good gentleman. His wife was a native of Florence, and I think they had 2 sons, and they're in the insurance business at the present time. Yes, you've talked about living in Campbell County. She has her own herd of cattle, takes care of our own cows, and all of that. So again, Michelle, welcome to Boone County.
Thank you, John. We walked too far away here.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize this until yesterday, but it was someone's birthday yesterday. I snuck that in there on him, so happy birthday. So make sure to tell him happy birthday. Gotta have a trick up my sleeve, right?
Don't tell them how old either.
Oh, I would never do that. Well, I guess before we dive on into, I'm going to give a little shameless plug in. I hope you all don't mind. But I came from our farm tour meeting to come here, so that's why I missed the business section of this. But we hit our orientation tonight for our farm tour host. So we're about a month away from that. So I left some brochures up there. If anyone's interested, it's on the northern end of the county this year. Excuse me. But help yourself and hope you guys can make it. So
What's the date?
it's June 22nd. And it starts at 10 and goes till 3. And then from 3 to 5, we have a celebration at the farmer's market. So we'll have live music, there's inflatables for the kids, we grill hot dogs and hamburgers. Several of the vendors are going to come and have kind of goodie items to hand out and things like that. So hope you guys can make it and spread the word if you can. So, yeah. So to get started, when Betsy called, you know, I kind of, at first I thought, oh man, I'm not from Boone County. That's going to be hard to find the history when you're not from somewhere. And John happened to call, and I thought, well, who better to know the history side of this than John Walton for the ag side of it. So that's what we decided to, yes, the history side, not just the ag history. But that's why we decided to kind of partner on this tonight. And if you can't hear me at any time, just throw your hand up or put by your ear so I know. I'm usually pretty loud, but just let me know if not. But that's how we're kind of going to talk about how it's changed over the years. So where it started and how it's changed to now, and we've got a lot of changes. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So I'll let you take it from here, Johnny.
Okay, I'll start in with the fact that extension service was established in 1914 as a Smith-Lever Act, and so along with that came the county agent system. We have had in Boone County, I think, in my opinion, some of the best agents that have been found in the state. I'm going to start way back with the agent who was here when my mother was a 4-H agent, a 4-H individual. That would have been back in the 20s, 1920s. Anyhow, and through that association, she was in the 4-H as a livestock judging. The first girl to ever judge 4-H livestock in the fair at Louisville. Thereby, that has had my interest through the years. But some other agents, one of the most notable back in from 1925, I think, to 47, was a gentleman by the name of H.R. Faulkner, Holly Rufus Faulkner. Some of you may have remembered him.
I do.
Yes, you would. He was a very good agent. Of course, he decided to move on, went to Woodford County. But the next agent that I will mention is one of the past, not too many years ago, Joe Claxton. Joe Claxton was here from 53 until he retired. And he was a very definite influence upon the extension programs, the 4-H programs of Boone County. Again, those are individuals to which I call mentors, because they were the persons who gave me, as you might say, the most interest in the agricultural field. With that, you want to get back in?
Whatever you want to do.
I thought maybe you wanted to show something.
Should
You got something, go ahead. Well, I can go, but,
Yeah, go ahead. You're
all right, keep on going. You never know. We're winging this one a little bit. She doesn't like the wing, but anyhow.
I have a timer on it.
Yeah. You know, farming has been the backbone of our society through the years. George Washington, of course, was one of the first noted farmers in the country. And so thereby, we've got to remember that agriculture has so much to do with our society. In Boone County, I'll get a little of that. Tobacco was the backbone of the farming industry. If you had a tobacco crop, you had an income. It has put many of us through college, through school, bought our cars, bought our tractors, and all of that. So I'm scared that hemp will not do quite the same for our younger generation. Now I want to get into a couple of really historical things that have happened. Has anyone in here ever heard of a cattle drive from Petersburg to Cincinnati? Is there a story out there anywhere that can go with that particular story?
My father told me when he was 17 years old, when he drove cows outside Cincinnati.
In about what years?
Driving them to across when the river was frozen, and drove them up through Cincinnati to the stockyard.
Anderson's Ferry. The story was that they gathered some gentlemen. In fact, Mr. Berkshire.
No, my father was Yule, Bob Yule.
Bob Yule.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now I know who you are. Oh yeah. One of those people that was displaced by the airport
Right.
many in years. But anyhow, I thought that was an interesting story to be able to put together a bunch of cattle, drive them up. Say this from Petersburg. I think the story I had was they started gathering them along the way to from Petersburg.
Started. I just know that he was in on it.
He was in on it. Well, can you imagine putting a bunch of cattle on the ferry boat? Anderson's Ferry was how they got them across the river.
Well, wasn't the river frozen? I thought the river was frozen.
No, I don't know. I thought
I wouldn't say, but I thought.
it wouldn't. If it had been, well, in those years the river was pretty small, pretty low anyhow at times. A friend of mine from Ludlow said his mother told him she had walked across the river from Ludlow to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know.
right. Anyhow, now there's another story that I had it's even more far-fetched than driving cattle. Somewhere along the line, I picked up the story that there were a flock, I guess you'd call it, a flock of turkeys that they walked from Florence to Cincinnati down Dixie Highway. That's a little more far-fetched. I'll agree with you. Even though there was traffic was pretty slim, but you know. So anyhow, they of course at that time the roads were toll roads. Florence to Burlington was a toll road. Burlington to Bellevue was a toll road. I can tell you that it started in 1877 down by the Dinsmore place, actually. You all are familiar with that location. They started it there for some reason. I have no reason why. There was some 30-odd men that had gathered in to start putting together, I guess you'd say, digging out the road. So it became a toll road. There was a toll house just out the edge of Burlington. In fact, Fairgrounds owns the ground, and we just tore the house down a few years ago. You know too much on us. Great, that's great. That is great. Then the toll road between Burlington and Bellevue, I think, was the last in the county that was bought up by the state, and that was done in the 20s in order to establish the river dams and so forth. So that became, at the time, it was just gravel and rock and mud, and then it became a little more gravel, and then tar and chips, then finally blacktop. Okay. How am I doing, Michelle? What?
You're doing good.
Yeah, doing good. Okay. The agricultural end of it, besides the tobacco, was one of the more interesting things to me was the wheat thrashing, the wheat. Now, of course, most of you would probably recognize wheat, the crop of wheat and what it's used for, bread and that kind of thing. But can you imagine a field of wheat being cut by a binder, made into little bundles, put in shocks, set in the field to cure, then gathered up by the wagons, loaded on wagons and brought to a thrashing machine. Then, of course, after the wheat was thrashed, it was stored till it was used for whatever. Of course, I as a child can remember the wheat stack, the big stack of wheat straw, and also in our barn at that time was a wheat bin where we stored the wheat in the bin until they decided to do something else with it. So I've got something to show that in order to have these bundles, when you bring them when they were brought to the thrasher, they were bound with string. Well, in order to put them through the thrasher, you had to cut the string. And this particular knife, I've found, it has come through a family estate auction, and it has a small W crafted on there. So this knife itself would probably go back into the 1800s or early 1900s. So I thought that might be interesting. It looks a little wicked. I mean, you can use that pretty, don't give it out, don't put it out too far. So that was one of the instruments. We were talking about the tobacco. Now, tobacco that we have known in recent years are tall and up like that, but originally the tobacco plant was not nearly that big. And also, at that time, in order to harvest the tobacco, you use this kind of a knife to split the stalk down and then cut it off and put it around on a stick. I see some gentleman there that seems to understand what this particular knife. Did you ever use it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'm glad I found somebody that used it. I've got several of them at the house. So, anyhow, one of the other things that I wanted to mention besides the cattle is being an industry or livestock for the county, for the farmer. Sheep were very much in the makeup of the farming operation. Of course, they the sheep that we know of today are what we call meat sheep. The gentleman out on East Bend Road, Bob Meyer, has a large herd flock of meat sheep. They have no wool. It became too expensive to shear the sheep for the amount of the wool. They were costing more to get them sheared than the wool was worth. So they then have developed this meat sheep as to go along with that. Well,
I'd like to jump in real quick on that too.
Yes.
A lot of what developed from that, you think of the farms back in the day, everybody had a couple dairy cows, everybody had a couple beef cows, a couple sheep, they lived off of everything. I guess it's trendy now to say it's a homestead, but everybody, that's how they used to survive, Well, it's kind of a lost art on knowing how to shear the sheep. And now people come in from, Nebraska. Some people bring them in from New Zealand, as far as foreign countries and things like that to get the sheep sheared, because so few people know how to do it good. So it's so expensive to bring them in, and then the markets are smaller places to sell the wool at. So a lot of times you'll probably hear hair sheep. That's what they're talking about. So they still have wool, but the way they talk about the quality of the wool, the highest quality has more crimps in it. So easiest way, if you look at my hair, just not those. Stay away with those. I have a bald spot, I'm blaming you. But so where it's really wavy, that would be a low quality wool. You know what I mean? So if it was tighter and crimpier, that would be your higher quality. So there's more fiber, there's more oil in it then. So this hair sheep, it just looks kind of flat, and that's why. So it's kind of a nickname, but if you hear hair sheep, that's what we're referring to. So a lot of the wool breeds, they were still pretty good as far as meat production as well, but it kind of had a double bonus of the wool production. But if you don't have shear, then the hair breeds are pretty good. So I just wanted to jump in on that.
good. That's what I want you to do.
So.
I need help all I can. Anyhow, she didn't like the sound of these. This would be one of the earliest, I guess, methods of shearing sheep. You had to do it by hand at that time. From that, it became shears, motorized, electric. Anyhow, now they're electric, but anyhow, back in those days, they were hand cranked and all of that. And the wool production was, at one point in time, okay. Now I'm going to tell a story on that particular situation. My father and grandfather were raised quite a number of sheep. And in the era of the Depression, wool got so cheap, as well as a lot of other things, that you could hardly afford to sell it. It cost more to sell. It's cost more to sell than what it would provide. Well, my father had accumulated quite a bit of wool, and we had it stored in the barn. Now, in wool, when it takes it off the sheep, you call it a fleece. And these fleeces were wrapped up with paper twine, not any other twine, because you could not get a fiber in the wool or they would throw it out. So anyhow, he had accumulated quite a bit and made a deal, I will call it, with the wool company in Louisville. How did we get this wool to Louisville? Now, of course, in processing it, once you get these fleeces and you put them in a sack, well, the sacks stood about that tall. And I don't really know how much they weighed, but they were pretty heavy. Anyhow, they had a packet boat docked in Bellevue, and they loaded, I'm not sure how many pounds or anything like that, but I do remember talking about the number of wagon loads that they took from the farm to Bellevue. Now, most of you probably know where I live. We live halfway between Burlington and Bellevue on top of what's known as the Walton Hill, or I call it the mountain. But anyhow, that was one of the stories that I thought would be interesting to go along with the sheep bit. Anything else? You about ready to take over?
What, did you want to talk about the huckster wagons?
Oh, yeah, that was
I made notes up there. for
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry,
That's all right.
I can't see what's it. Oh, yeah, okay, you've taken better care of me than I deserve. Anyhow, the Turkey Drive, there is what is called Boone County white corn, which was established in Boone County, and it's to my knowledge used as for meal, for grinding. We have some other people in the county who have grown corn, and we ground it for cornmeal. Makes good cornmeal. So that's one of the traits, at least, one of the claims to fame that Boone County has had. One of a more interesting thing, and thank Michelle for putting this all up there, because I'm scattered. Anyhow, the huckster wagon, store to your door. How many of you remember store to your door? All right, yeah. They would come bring around the goods that you wanted. You need probably flour, meal, and that kind of thing, and trade for eggs and whatever. One of the items that I had not mentioned was the fact that in those days, you didn't have dairies as dairy, very few. I mean, commercial dairies. They were. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have ways to cool the milk and all of that.
My daddy did.
No, I know your dad, your family was one of the prime first Yow dairies, and over near toward the airport that I recall having known about.
He delivered, house to house.
House to house. He processed and delivered it around house to house. There were some people and some other people that did that.
Yeah.
Also, we made cream. Now you can store cream in 5-gallon cans in the basement and all of that. And that's where the huckster wagon comes in that I was going to remind. The huckster man would come along, pick up the cans of cream and take them on to Cincinnati and bring them and sell them for you, this kind of thing, or trade them for eggs or whatever. And along with that, I have to tell a story on myself. It's one of those kind. We were doing this, processing a small amount of cream with a few cows behind the barn, out in the barn lot. Sanitation was not considered an ugly word in those days. So, and the story they always told on me was, this is a story on myself, that I would, whenever they got ready to go to the barn to milk, I'd come to the house and get my a little tin can or a little can cup, go to the barn, they would fill that with fresh milk for me. And we were talking about mill, the making of the wheat and cornmeal, this kind of thing. At least I know of two mills on the creeks of the county that ground the milk. One was on Middle Creek, down above Bellevue on Middle Creek, which of course is one of the better creeks in this county, and is probably the purest creek that's still in the county. A lot of it originates in my backyard, but anyhow, that's beside the point. But also, there was another mill over on Gunpowder. Now, if you're familiar with Camp Ernest Road, you go down across Gunpowder Creek, and there's a road just up the bank there a little bit that turns to the right, and then that goes down around to the creek again, and that was owned and operated by some of the Seabury family, I believe. There is There, I think one of the Seabridge still owns land in that particular area, which was creek. Now, one of the other interesting things about Boone County is the fact that the roads that we now enjoy were not always the same. They didn't follow the same path back when they were established as they do now. The mud road from Burlington to Bellevue was up and down over the hills and around the valleys and so forth, and it was pretty rough, especially when my family came to Boone County in 1844. So anyhow, one of the other things, of course, many of you might remember this road out here, that down here. In fact, there's a picture in one of the books over there showing the two-lane road between Burlington and Florence with a one-lane bridge. So forth was that. Yeah, I ran out of.
Ran out stuff to talk
Yeah,
about.
let her give you an update now.
It is kind of interesting, you hear about the store-to-door stuff, and that's pretty much what Amazon Prime is all about. What if those trends circle around? Here, go ahead and move on.
There was one more thing. Talking about the Huckster wagon, I intended to bring ice cones. Now, how many of you remember probably having ice brought to your house and put in the ice box? The ice box set up usually on the back porch or the side porch to where the water could drain out. But anyhow, that was the way we had ice delivered at that time. Of course, earlier they said they had ice houses in which, when the winter season was, they'd cut ice out of the creek and out of the river, or hopefully not out of the river, but out of creeks that were fairly clean, and store it in sawdust bins or sawdust underground, where you could have ice cream in the summertime. Okay.
Not too shabby.
Not too.
What, do you want to talk through these tools real quick?
Okay. Yeah, I've already covered those three.
Yep.
Now, anybody got an idea what this?
It's an auger for drilling holes in the timbers to raise a barn.
Right. That is it. In barn constructions at the time, of course, when you peg the barn, you put log or put the timbers together, bored a hole through, and put wooden pegs in. I found this and I said, well, that would probably dry pegs pretty good. Here is something, and I don't know whether any of you may have heard this particular story. It was on TV, on the radio, on TV not too long ago, concerning monkey wrench. Did anybody remember having heard anything about the story about the monkey wrench? Okay, originally, and I'm a little fuzzy, but bear with me. It was developed in England, and in some way or another, the man had a name similar to monkey. Be careful there, you know. But anyhow, so thereby, this particular tool was called a monkey wrench.
The inventor.
Well, everybody knows what a bracing bit is. I was going that along with the auger for the other. Michelle, have at it.
Okay, well, I might need your help on some of these here. So on the stuff up front, so there's a museum at the Bluegrass Stockyards as well.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance to go down there, we're in a pretty convenient spot. It's a straight shot down 75. There's a Stockyards, there's a big restaurant, there's other stores in there, and they have a museum as well. So they kind of started this after the fire at the old Stockyards, and they kind of realized, like, wow, we may not have had this. So it sort of sparked something there for them to try to preserve it a little bit. But I'm sure everybody knows the bottom right corner with the plows. Everybody's seen one of those, I'm sure. I think John's used them.
Oh, yeah.
So, the top right, where there's some other sheep shears up top, the top right there. What did you call the bottom of the scale? What type of scale did you call that?
Beam scale.
A beam scale at the bottom. So the weight is to the right. You see the little weight hanging there. So they've had a few of these on display. A few of them that caught my eye. There's the iron forge, the anvil, the yokes hanging up. You thought that was a calf leader in the top in the middle, right?
I would, that was the best I could think of. We looked at it, and I don't know anybody got an idea about that one?
It's
Right
in
down the
those.
middle, of course, you got the hay hook on top. I didn't bring a hay hook, but,
Probably easier to push
Yeah.
this one out. Yeah, so the hay hook is right here. So you can barely see it, but it's sort of, it pulls up through there. So, you know, it's always kind of amazing. You look at some of the old barns, and I guess I'm an old barn nerd to a point, I guess, but our barn at home, the basement was where they milked the cows at. But where the cows came out, that's where they had the stalls for the sows. So they had the sows on the other side of it, and there's a chicken coop next to it. Well, upstairs, where that levels out, there's two doors. So it was before they baled hay. So they would pull through from the wagon, take it on a hook off the wagon, and put it on either side on a hay loft. Well, then, to add one more thing to it, there's all the rails where they used to hang tobacco at too. And there's a stripping room in the back. So talk about using a multi-purpose building right there. But the hay hooks are really more for baled hay. A lot of times you can pick it up and move it and stuff like that with those. Some people still use them. Right here, this one I always think is kind of interesting. Does anybody know what that is? Have you seen any of those before? If you hit a dairy, you've probably seen them.
never, that's a calf weaner. Put in the nose of the calf to make sure he doesn't get any extra meat.
Yeah, so once you wean the calf, if they're stubborn and they don't want to go off the mom, or like especially at a dairy, it can really be a bad problem. So once those heifers are weaned, if they suck on another heifer, that could cause mastitis, and that can basically create a blind quarter in the calf. So not too many people want 3/4 on a cow that they can milk. They want all 4. But it can really cause a lot of issues in the udder development on those heifers. So they'll put those on sometimes if they're being stubborn, not wanting to come off of mama, and sometimes if they're wanting to, terrorize the other heifers in their pen would. So, but basically it just goes right in the nose like that. Those 2 prongs do, and then that sort of smacks them in the mouth so they can't nurse. And sometimes some of the old dairies, they would use that when they were milking, they would just kind of clamp it there. If they were acting up, they would use that, and they just sort of stop. They don't know what to do when that kind of tightens on them. It's kind of funny. So, but I thought that was kind of neat. Those were a few things they had at the museum there, and I was actually there right after you called me, so I thought I'm getting pictures of this stuff when I'm here. So it worked out great.
Up on the left is the forge, a forge for making the heat for the anvil for working steel. Everybody I imagine has seen that. One of those, and of course the anvil down in the center there is a very important part of the whole method of taking care of the metal and the farm and making your own as a thing. You didn't go to the hardware store to buy it, you made it up, and this kind of thing.
And that's still heavily used in the equine industry. Is anybody in here affiliated with horses or anything? Any background? Okay. Well, so I'll speak from experience. The farrier that I always used, a lot of times you can buy the horseshoes, right? Just a set of horseshoes. Not every horse's foot is shaped the same. All of our feet look different, right? It's the same thing for horses. Some of them are wider, some longer. Some they have to kind of correct. If they get, mine always said he always get used to grow a lot of toe. He would grow outwards. So instead of flat, he would go outwards. But they have to shape each shoe to fit each horse and what they do. So whatever their job is depends on what kind of shoe they need, and if they're navicular or anything like that, sometimes they need to raise the hoof up and down. So just about every farrier has an anvil in their truck. And sometimes they are shaping shoes. I mean, it's a lot of work to do that. I mean, it's basically a custom fit every time, which is good. That's what they need, so.
I'm jumping in. At the stockyards there, if you're ever down that way, it's a very interesting stop just for touring and seeing what's there. There's a wearing apparel, boots, and this kind of thing shop. There's also a meat store that in the yard. There's all of this
Well, it's actually
display.
Brooks Meats. So it's in Walton. They have a location there as
Yeah, the
well.
meats there in the yards come from the Brooks Meat organization at Walton, which is the old, okay. Anyhow, also in another room in this yard, they call it the yards now instead of just stockyards because of it is a interesting place to stop and look. But anyhow, in one room there, I would judge that the horseshoes are probably more plentiful than any other place in the country. There's just rows and rows and stacks of horseshoes that they've got.
Well, it's a farrier supply store.
Yeah, it's a farrier
So
supply
they
store.
can stock their trucks there. And actually it's a very innovative place. They've added a room for the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. So it's an educational classroom. They bring a lot of teachers in and they can give them lessons on what to take back to teach the kids about the cattle industry in Kentucky, ag in Kentucky. You know, some kids, I guess the average is 3 generations separated from the farm. A lot of these kids don't know that their milk comes from a cow and not from Kroger. So, that has to be established. They don't understand how they can eat grass, but people can't eat grass. So they actually they've got a 3D cow there, and the kids can use little bean bags, and it shows how they digest grass. So it's pretty neat. It's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking on how they teach that kind of thing. So,
Very good.
yeah. And that timer was the end of your section, John. I have to pick on him. He likes to pick on me too.
Hey, this gal is a super fine little gal. I'm real
I'm glad to
proud of
be here. I'm very glad for the opportunity. So, but a couple more pictures here, and you'll be able to tell. I like to use pictures on here, and I like to talk. So, but if you guys have questions too, just raise your hand through. I forgot to say that earlier. But I'm sure everybody knows the dinner bell up there. I know a lot of people my age don't have those anymore, but my mom still has one in front of the house. So, and on the right, there's a lot of kind of infographics out there these days, so I try to kind of keep a handle on them and share those when I can. But it's kind of a neat visual. When you think of horsepower, not everybody realizes it means that's what it compares to. 32 actual horses.
What year?
So, 1902, a combine harvester is pulled by 33 horses. So yes, that has changed
Not
quite a
Boone
bit
County.
by now.
Not enough ground for that.
The next one up, it's interesting this year, and this isn't completely 100% accurate, but it's a pretty neat visual to get you an idea of it. We experienced just record flooding this past year, record rainfalls, and so much to the ground, people, oh my gosh, it's flooded, I can't get in there and work. But you start looking back on the history of it, look how much was a wetland in West Kentucky. All that yellow used to be underwater or swamps. Now granted, Muhlenberg County is still fairly swampy in some areas. But it's kind of interesting, the history of all this. So the grayish color was a prairie land. The dark green was forest, which is where we are. The kind of pale green is woodland. So basically all of the bluegrass, where all the big thoroughbred farms are, and the bluegrass, what we're known for is the bluegrass state right there, was all woodlands, and then the yellow is wetlands. So the uses have definitely changed over the years. I thought that was kind of neat to think about. Here's another one. These pictures were at the stockyards as well, and I just like to show this because you guys were asking about the changes in ag. This is a huge change and a really good visual right here. So this is what the feeder steers looked like in 1960. They were short, they were fat, and they didn't have much muscle, but a lot of marbling. Okay? So that was after, well, I guess it was the 70s is where they kind of went to the other extreme. They went to these big, tall cattle that, you know, I could walk underneath of their bellies and not have to duck. And they could jump a 10-foot fence. Okay? So it kind of went in extremes for a while. So now we've sort of balanced it out. I mean, you can see this guy's probably 6'2", 6'3", and that's a finished steer. So 2-year-old steer, barely making it to his hip there. Okay? So it's changed quite a bit since then, but this was from the Bluegrass Fair Cattle Show. So there's the Bluegrass Fair, and then there is the, I think Bluegrass used to have their own sale back in the day there, but they've got a couple Angus and Herefords over there. Yeah, Bluegrass Fat Steer and the Champion Hereford below. So then the next one, this is Fred Ferris. He was a Clark County FFA member. He's holding the Grand Champion Angus steer, which brought a record price of $1.21 a pound, which is kind of interesting because they're only $1.22 a pound now. So, and fertilizer costs quite a bit more, and so does feed. So, it's food for thought sometimes, right? I'll get back to that point.
What year was this?
This was, I think this was 1960 as well.
Okay,
So I think, I'm pretty sure it's the same time frame as the other pictures up there. It's definitely the same style as the deer, you know. But it's kind of interesting, the Ferris family was very involved with UK, the sheep units. I believe it's the same family. So it's kind of interesting from that side of it. But Gene Shuck Center was the owner of a thoroughbred restaurant. He purchased a 1,015-pound animal. So it's about the same weight. But that range to about 1,200 pounds are usually when people are processing fed steers now. So it's just a little bit different, but they look so different than this, okay? I'll show you another picture of that. But then G.W. Gardner was the head of the stockyards firm at that point. So, these look a little more familiar to what you see around here now. They look a little better, don't they? I kind of call myself a bit of a cow snob. I think these look a lot better than they used to. So the trends are a lot different then. So I wanted to put production cows and show cows up here. There's a very big difference between the two. The other pictures were of show cows, so they're groomed, they're washed, their hair's trimmed, they're cleaned up, things like that. So the ones on the right are a better comparison as far as how the cattle were prepared for the pictures. But you can see they're a lot taller, they're more muscular. So fat is flat, muscle is round. See, there's a lot more dimension in these cattle. So we've gone towards a more lean animal. So you basically think the animals in the 60s were kind of short and fat and chubby. Well, in the 70s, they went really lean. They used the continental breeds, your Chianina, your Gelbies, your Limousine. And they're all super lean animals. They're very big statured animals. They kind of use those, combined them, and now this is what we've got a result of, these smoky cows that are, it's high marbling, but they finish faster, and there's more meat there when you go to the process. So the interesting side of that, we mentioned that the price is about the same, $1.21 a pound. That's one thing that's, I think Boone County should really be commended for, is there's a lot of diversity here in the agriculture industry. We've got everything from beef cattle to poultry to sheep to nurseries, vegetable fruit production. I mean, you name it, we've got it here. And you can't, I guess, I hate to say you can't get by like you used to, but you can't get by just on farming the way it was done in the 60s. That's just not reality anymore. When tobacco sort of started phasing out, it really changed what ag looked like here. So, you know, a lot of people took that. Some people went and got all farm jobs. Some people got a little more creative, and some people did both, so that's fun too, right? But, you know, take Kinman's for example. They've got an agritourism operation, if you haven't been out there before. So they're educating people every day on what farming is, where their food comes from, all that good stuff. Some people related to the beef industry, they'll sell freezer beef. So instead of selling to the stockyards, because unfortunately Cincinnati doesn't have stockyards anymore. It'd be really nice if they did. But you know, Lexington, Paris, those are kind of the closest places you could take and sell cattle to, which that is one nice thing about the industry, you have that freedom. That's sort of where the tobacco industry really cut people off. If you don't have a contract now, it's really difficult to get a good price just selling in the open market. So that's really changed it for a lot of people there. But you know, it's an innovative way. There's several processors around here, so people sell boxed beef, and they can make more than $1.21 a pound, and they can make more of a business out of it and be more profitable. You have something you want to say?
No.
Oh, I thought you were edging into the microphone.
I was going to wrap my face on. That's
Well, go ahead and say it if you want.
Well, that lady said that over there is part of the Kimberly's organization.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, so you might be a little familiar with it then. Very nice, very nice. Well, I think there's a lot of people envious of that. It's such a neat operation out there. So, and it takes a lot of innovation, a lot of work to be able to do that, for sure. So, we'll jump on a little bit. So John covered a lot of the history of Extension. These are the actual acts. If you ever need some reading material and you're interested in the KRS statutes.
If you can't sleep at night.
That's right. That's right. It's perfect for that. So I was thinking it's kind of interesting though. The Morrill Act is what started UK. So UK wasn't always University of Kentucky. It used to be Kentucky A&M. So just like Texas A&M, Kentucky Ag and Mechanics. So I tell some of the kids in schools, and it's just mind blown that it used to be something different than UK Wildcats. But it really takes you back. That's how the college got started, was because of ag in the state. The legislators deemed that if there was enough ag here, they needed to have higher level education for farmers. So, it's kind of like, don't forget where you came from. That's definitely in there. So, but that was the college land bill with the Morrill Act. The research station started with the Hatch Act. So we've got a dairy unit, a beef unit, poultry unit. So there's research being done every day at UK. For the future, trying different things, trying to improve, trying to help better solutions for farmers so people can take that information and be more profitable and more efficient. That's kind of the day and time that we're in. You have to think that way. So that's why they're there. That's why they're still there now, this long after. Is anyone familiar with Kentucky State University in here? In Frankfurt? A handful? Okay, so KSU is kind of our sister college. So there was the 1862 when we started, the 1890 is when the diversity colleges were added. So they're the sister land grant. And they cover like the aquaculture. They do a lot of research on fish production, bee production. They have a lot of goat research going on and things like that. So it's a really neat university. They do a third Thursday event once a month.
One of Kentucky State's major project is pawpaws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They do a lot of horticulture research as well. So I believe there's a pretty big pawpaw patch at the Arboretum. I know Lacey did a lot of programs with that recently, but if you're interested in it, I know they have some out there. So, but that's a little background on that. There's internet hooked up, correct? Yes. Yes. Okay. I've got a video to show you. Let's see if it lets.
See, Michelle's the mechanical part of the story. I'm just the old off the top of the wall.
Okay, let me see if I can get the volume up here.
The new generation, all this kind of stuff. Mighty good.
Okay, so this is a video they put together for the centennial of Extension. After the 100 year. It's just kind of neat. It's kind of a short snippet of where we came from to where we are now. So I want to share that with you. And it's only 7 minutes long. It's not very long, and I can cut it short if you all want me to. There we go. Can everybody hear it okay? Hold on.
The gentleman that's going to be narrating this is a product of Southern agriculture. His father was a peanut specialist in the state of Georgia. I got acquainted
Today, it is grown.
I'm sorry.
I got acquainted with him when he became part of the program, extension program in the UK, and we have a real close relationship.
Oh, well, she's working on that. I was driving down, I think it was Kentucky 18, pretty far down. I just, and there were cattle that
Here we go.
painted, they look like Oreo cookies.
That's-
Here we go, now it's working.
Dutch
Perfect.
Belton, it belonged to the Brutusel family. Yeah, Dutch Belton.
Interesting.
Little small, they're small
Yeah.
fruits.
All right, now we got it working. Sorry about that.
Extension in Kentucky began on a very agricultural and rural orientation. Today, it has grown to meet the needs of all of Kentucky, from rural landscapes, agriculture, youth, and even urban centers. Moving to the future, we know that our value and our directions will be based on three core values. The first being our research base. The second, our need to stay relevant through conversations with local individuals and statewide individuals. And finally, to preserve our trusted ambassador status by developing strong relationships with our clientele.
It's been 100 years since Congress formalized the Cooperative Extension Service with the Smith-Weaver Act in 1914. It helped make possible the American Agricultural Revolution that dramatically increased farm productivity. Whether they rode up to the farm on a horse or buggy or they used the latest communication tools, county extension agents have been providing research-based information to Kentucky farm communities for over a century.
People don't realize one thing, we're back in the 30s and 40s. You had to take what you get, one of the roads, there was one road too, that's Kentucky 15, went from Hammond. I guess I was the last candidate in the state to get an horse around.
30 years, extension has adapted to changing times and landscapes.
I have to pause that. So did everyone catch what he said? They got a horse allowance. So instead of a mileage reimbursement, they got a horse allowance. I always thought that was pretty cool.
The goal remains the same, however, to address a wide range of human, plant, and animal needs in both urban and rural areas. Modeled after the 4-H Youth Development Reality Store, the simulation program called It's Your Reality is designed to encourage students to make wise budget choices.
One of the goals of the Managing in Tough Time initiative is to help people get back to basics in terms of their finances. And so this is an opportunity for us to integrate and work with college students to set them on the right path to start with. So they can leave this event and they can start thinking about those basic financial decisions that they're going to have to make.
I bought a 92 Accord and stuff. I mean, I looked for something that just did for me, that got me from point A to point B, nothing fancy.
It's prepared me to be a more wise spender and maybe save up a little bit more to pay off loans after graduation or work towards buying a car or a house after I graduate.
That reality store program is done in Boone County.
Providing farmers with training through Kentucky Farm Start Program. West Boone has been farming less than 10 years, so he qualifies for the training led by Clint Hardy in Davies County.
That has really helped my operation out because as a beginning farmer, trying to figure things out just on paper, with paper and pencil, it's easy to leave some things out and, at the end of the year, be disappointed. But with the enterprise budgets, they really hold your feet to the fire and calculate in every aspect of the cost of production.
In addition, Wes is building turkey houses to expand his farm enterprise. The mission to serve families has remained constant for a century.
The women learned a great deal about canning. Eventually, we got electricity into the county. 1942, our roads came into the county. And we were able to learn to freeze food.
The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, is one example of helping those who can least afford healthy meals.
What we try to do is to work with the SNAP clients, families, and helping them to learn new recipes.
Sí, porque es verdura fresca que venimos a cosechar.
So I try to teach them to better, use their SNAP benefits to the fullest, to buy healthy food for their family, try to, help them prepare nutritious meals.
That can take bacteria from the meat, put it on your vegetables, and that's called cross-contamination.
Good nutrition is the foundation for everything from healthy communities to 4-H clubs building robots.
In a nutshell, with science, engineering, and technology, we're helping youth develop their critical thinking and problem-solving skills.
All right, you want to have 5 tables in there?
Which is what traditional 4-H has always done. We're just doing it with non-traditional programs and projects.
The club meets at McCracken County High School.
Basically translates when you need to stay here to send to there to tell it to do whatever. Whether it be tossing a frisbee or going a certain speed or turning right.
So 4-H brings us the idea, and we go to take robotics competition and blend it in with our project vehicle engineering, and here we are. And, it's been a perfect fit.
Individually, they're going to develop hands-on skills with using tools, design, fabrication, programming. As a group, they're going to develop teamwork and cooperation skills.
It's a robotics team. That means that everybody has a role, and that even within your role, you're still needing to help out the team. It's not just about a certain individual that's perfected in one thing.
If the group wins the regional competition, they will go on to a world competition.
But just like your heart surrounds is close to the center of your chest, the heartwood surrounds the center of the tree. Can you all say heartwood? Heartwood! Very good.
Our trusted ambassador status is always going to be built on those face-to-face relationships across the state. But we know that we need to innovate and that we need to meet people where they are. And for a growing number of our clients, that's in the online environment. I'd like to introduce you to Haley Pierce, who is a strategic communications agent in Jefferson County, Louisville Metro.
This position is new to the state and to Extension. I'm the content manager for all the communications that leave our office, including social media. We're still doing all of our normal traditional stuff. All we're doing is adding on. We're adding on a ton of social media. We're adding on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, anything to engage our audience. We want to meet our audience where they are. We don't want them coming to us. We want to go to them and meet them on those platforms that they are already using 100 times a day. The first agent in Jefferson County was an ag agent. His name was Nathaniel Frank. He was hired February 1st of 1913.
As you can see, we have come a long way in 100 years. Looking ahead, it will be our relationships, our relevance, and our research base that will enable us to adapt and be responsive for the next 100 years of the Smith-Lieber Act.
Hope you guys liked the video. I thought that was pretty neat when they put that together. And to kind of update from there, so Haley is now the communications director for UK, so she's on campus, and we were the second county to have a communications coordinator. So we have the same position. We've actually had some turnover on that, so we have our new communications coordinator starting on Monday. So if you've seen a lot of new stuff on Facebook, that's why. Hopefully we'll see a lot more social media stuff coming. Here we go. Okay. So to kind of compare the then and now of ag, has anyone searched through the census data before, the ag census data? Much? Okay. I told you I'm a farm nerd. I look at this stuff and I think it's really neat. So it's kind of interesting to compare this stuff. Though that's interesting. It's not shown the same way. Can everyone see it okay, the way it's displayed up there? I won't mess with it if you can see it all right.
Good enough.
Good enough? Okay, sounds good. So the pictures didn't come across real clear, so that's why I kind of transferred it over to the left there. But I was really surprised when I got looking at these numbers. The average farm size in 1959 census and the 1964 census were only 9 acres off of the 2017 information. Yes, it was 100 acre farms were the average in 59 and 64, and it's 109 now is the average. So the numbers have changed, the number of farms, but the average size is held steady. So I thought that was pretty interesting, really. I mean, there's a huge ag background here in Boone County, so it's good to see that's being preserved. Is everyone familiar with the ag districts in Kentucky? So, soil conservation and natural resources conservation service work with those. So what it takes is I think it has to be a minimum of 50 acres. No, there's not a minimum per farm, but there's a minimum of 75 acres, I think. They all have to connect at some point. So if they all connect, they can become an ag district, and it kind of protects you from planning and zoning for development rights, things like that, if you want to keep it a farm. So there's been more and more of those coming up here in Boone County. So obviously we've experienced a lot of growth over the years. You know, from 75 coming through, and with 75 came the mall, the urban growth. You know, now we're kind of seeing the industrial growth coming in. You know, it's one of those things we sort of look at, it's like it's a positive, it's a good economy. You know, there's a lot of opportunities here, so it's a positive, but it is kind of scary for the ag industry here in the county. So it's definitely a time to try to protect it. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to read the one on the right for 2017.
Oh, I can skip over to it.
So basically we're saying 1,204 farms in that area in 1959 and 64, and now we're down to 600 or something.
Yes, down to 608.
How many were there before 53?
Over 1,000, so it's about half of what it was. So.
Before the airport.
Yes, exactly, before the airport, before the mall.
No, it wasn't before the airport, but I mean before the.
It's before expanding like
Yeah,
that.
right.
And how many acres were in farmland? Like 67,000 now. What was it in the 50s?
In the 50s was, in 59 it was 121 and 222 acres, dropped to 114,064, and I believe 60-some thousand, something like that.
62 or something?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, 67,211 acres in farmland.
So it's cut down quite a bit.
Yes, yes it has. That's kind of the trend. There's very few, which that was interesting too. That didn't change as much. If you look down the breakdown, the 1 to 9 acres in the different categories, they've increased that 1 to 9 acres. So it's sort of, you know how we say everything kind of comes back around in a trend, kind of like the door-to-door, and now it's the Amazon door-to-door in sales. People are kind of going back to the homestead thing. People want to learn these skills that have kind of been lost in a generation. They want to learn how to can again. They want to learn how to process their own meats at home. They want to raise their own food. So it's kind of interesting. People are going back to the 10-acre tracts, 5-acre tracts, when they kind of want to live off the land a little bit. The large-scale farms, I thought was interesting here, the 500 to 499 acres. There were 6 in 59, 7 in 64. The 1,000 acres or more was 1. I don't have the exact comparison. Unfortunately, they don't have it. They don't have the breakdown on here of how many head of cattle, how many acres in cropland. It's not as precise as it is now, but it's just kind of interesting to me that hasn't changed significantly for that big of a time span. And we have a couple farmers here that are in the 1,000 acres or more. Not very many, but it's sort of, if you're going to be the traditional farm, you kind of have to get big or get out. I'm sure you've all heard about the dairy industry and those changes. There hasn't been a dairy in Boone County for a while, but a lot of the dairies were recently, the contracts were just ended with Dean's Milk out of Winchester. A lot of them, they just got a letter and said, we're not going to buy your milk anymore. It's kind of, you got to figure it out. You know, so some of those sold out. They switched to a beef cattle operation so they can still use those facilities. And a couple of them went the agritourism route. They started making cheese or ice cream. So, but that's a big endeavor to take on too. You know, talk about needing a rainy day fund to be able to pay for a new startup like that. But that's kind of how that direction has gone. But you know, another aspect of Boone County that we really have going for us is the top quality soils. I mean, you think about the whole area from the top of the county to the bottom along the river. You could grow anything in that sandy soil as long as you can water it. You know, I mean, and that we are so lucky to have that. And it's really interesting. If anyone's heard of the Schwanke Brothers farm down along the river, I've been lucky enough to get to work with them too. And I mean, they're national yield winners. So people want to think there's no ag in Boone County. There's just the airport and the mall and da-da-da. Oh, no. We've got national corn yields that have been grown right here in Boone County. And, you know, I mean, they're great producers. Now, it's a small number of people that are farming at that scale. The majority are kind of in that 100-acre range, though. There's a lot of cattle in the area. There's a lot of grain crops being grown on other places.
A lot of water, too.
A lot of water? Yeah, there's a lot of water right now. We need a few dry days to get some hay mowed, is what we need. But the hay ground that's another top commodity that's being grown as well. The poultry industry is kind of catching up too. And the poultry industry is definitely unique from the commercialized version. Is anyone familiar with the poultry barns in West Kentucky? Like the setup that Purdue has?
Big operation where 30 to 40,000 chickens in one house. That's the big companies like Tyson, they put out those houses. You know, somebody wants to do it, they will furnish them. Well, they will vacuum, you might call it.
Well, it's a contract system.
Yeah, it's a contract.
It's a vertically integrated contract system. So these people the farmer will buy the barn. They're about 800 feet long, 12 feet tall in some cases. They're all climate controlled. There's all automatic, they're all automatic feeders. And then there's water consistently going through there, but they've got monitors in these buildings to check the temperature and the humidity at any minute throughout the day. And so the Tyson, the Purdue's, they actually own the chickens and the feed. So that way they don't give out their recipe for their rations, but they bring the feed in, they bring the chicks in, they have them for about 8 weeks, and then Purdue or Tyson sends the guys in to pick them up, and they put them on the trucks to take them to the processing facility. So, you know, typically those buildings are going to be constructed close to where the Tyson plant is. So we're just a little too far for that to be feasible, but there's a really good industry here at the farmer's market. I mean, we've got one of the best in northern Kentucky here. I was joking, my eyes about popped out of my head the first week I was here looking at all the facilities we have. We're so lucky here, but that's a great market for people. You can sell it straight to the consumer. Yeah, we're really fortunate for that, and we have a community that likes that. You know, we've got a great community of people that want to go and buy local, and it supports the local farms.
Several vendors there at the market each week that have eggs and have frozen chicken. They tote their freezers in with their chickens or whatever. Beef also, we have a couple processors of beef there, and this is all homegrown, all raised by the individuals and processed and brought to the see, kind of like that huckster deal I was talking about, the store to your door. Well, we got the store to the door of the market, of the farmer's market. One of the other items about the dairies, of course, there's no dairy operation in Boone County now. I don't know how many, a lot of people had a dairy back in the earlier days, but anyhow, there is a dairy in Kenton County, just not too far out of Walton toward Piner, I believe, right? Anyhow, that is what is termed robotic. In other words, these cows are milked automatically, not by hand or not by the ordinary milker condition, but they enter a rotary platform and go around that and milk and then go back to pasture. Also, if you ever were traveling towards Chicago, there is a fabulous place up there, which is
it's called Fair Oaks Dairy.
There you go, boy, I'm glad you did. Fair Oaks Dairy, and they milk I don't know how many hundreds of cows.
It's over 10,000.
Yeah, okay.
And they've recently branched out into a swine unit and a poultry unit. So they show everything from start to finish. I have not seen the poultry unit, I've seen the swine unit. Anyhow, they took the 4-H kids up there for a week for a tour, or not too long ago, a couple years ago. And it's an amazing project. Amazing project. So just to touch on a couple other things there. So in 1964, they did have reported there was 600 acres of row crops in Boone County. So they did report that. To jump over to the 17 census, I guess this is a good time to plug into, this is why you need to report precise information, right? So we can report it to groups like you all of the stats on the county. And a lot of times we work off of this stuff for extension too for our programming. We really rely, We are a grassroots organization, so we rely on the community to tell us what kind of programming you all would like to see. You know, if you would say there's not a farm tour in the county, but you would like to see one, tell us. That's what we work off of. That's how we plan our programs. So, these are some of the stats. It's kind of interesting, really, when you compare it to the other northern Kentucky counties. Like I said, everyone thinks it's so urbanized here, but there is a strong agriculture community still, and we're thriving and going good here. We said over 67,000 acres in farmland, close to 16,000 acres in hay. So that's legumes and grass crops in that. Beef cattle is close to 11,000. Quite a good number for sheep and poultry on that. And I don't think the other northern Kentucky counties have the alpaca and llama population that we do. So that's another diversity to think of in there as well. So it makes it pretty interesting. So as you all know, I worked in Scott County previously, so I worked with tobacco a lot more there. They had a lot of growers with the greenhouses that they were starting in the float beds, and then probably had close to 75 growers still raising tobacco then. So I came up here, I thought, well, I'm going to go to a farm service agency to see who all's out there so I can get in, because I started in April, so I thought, well, they're going to be starting plants soon. They're going to need some help. Whoop, that's my alarm. But we've got 6 growers here in the county. So there's no plants being grown here, so that's another kind of way that tobacco growers have innovated. They're not raising their plants, they're not building the greenhouses like they used to, but they're buying a lot of the plants already started and then setting them and going from there. So it's kind of interesting, but we still have 150 acres of burley tobacco in Boone County. So I'll skip ahead here. And there's 170 bee colonies registered as well. We're another pretty big pocket for beekeeping in this area. We get a lot of questions about pollinator gardens, and a lot of that is a positive. The urban growth, a lot of the subdivisions and the developers are wanting to add in pollinator gardens when they're putting stuff in. So it's a step in the right direction, that's what I say. I guess the biggest thing I wanted to touch on as far as how it's changed, how agriculture has changed over the last 50 years, is kind of going off of what you asked me to talk about, Ms. Conrad. I guess the main point is, the farmland overall has decreased significantly, so it's increased the importance for precision agriculture. You just can't do it like we used to. Stuff's too expensive, the input costs are too high, the fertilizer's too high. The seed costs, you really have to do your homework stuff and keep a sharp pencil when you're doing it. This picture really, it always amazes me. So these are corn plants. So not the one to the right, but on the slide that's up there, the bigger one. You can see where that row just stops. And then they start it again. There's way too much human error to be able to do that without technology. So there's systems like auto steer, the GPS systems that you can install on tractors and sprayers now, and you can do stuff like that. So there's no wasted seed and there's no wasted space. So it's pretty amazing how you can type in the GPS coordinates and plan all that out. A lot of the grain growers in this area, they have maps for every square foot of a field. They call it grid sampling. So they'll go through and do soil tests for every square foot, and they know the soil analysis, and they know exactly how much fertilizer went in there. So you can basically think every place where there's a plant, they've got a soil profile. So they're doing it down to the minute to know exactly how much fertilizer to use. I know that's a common concern is the runoff from fertilizer, but that's my big thing. It's so expensive. Nobody wants to put extra on, especially not if it's going to run off. But they put down what's needed. And they've got it down to the science on where it's needed, so nothing's being over-fertilized or under-fertilized. Has anyone ever taken soil tests at the Extension Office? No hands? Oh, good. Okay. I was saying, you're paying your taxes. Bring some soil tests in. Make use of it here. But yeah, you can test your garden, test your lawn, your fields, anything like that. But basically what we do, we send that to UK and they take a sample, they analyze what nutrients are in the soil, they take a look at what was there last year. So just an example, if you had soybeans in it last year, okay, you're going into corn with it, they figure out how many nutrients were used for that soybean crop, and then they calculate what's needed to raise that corn crop. And that's how they calculate what to put on there. So it's pretty simple I'm making it very simple on that, dialing it down. We also do line recommendations as well to get the pH to where you need it for the specific crops too. Another point of this too, the precision ag, it comes down to you have to figure out how to produce more on less land and do it more efficiently. So, and a lot of people have done that. I mean, you think of the population growth, we've above and beyond. We're way overproducing what we ever could have thought of doing back without the research and the information and the data. And, it's funny, you talk to some of the specialists, it's like, oh gosh, we couldn't find it on Google, we couldn't find this publication online, they didn't have an electronic copy. And they're just like, we used to have to look at file cabinets and spend hours in the library researching this. Don't even get aggravated with that. But over the years too, all this research that has helped as well, and NRCS has done the same kind of research, so the erosion control is so much better now. The pollution to the water, the main pollutant is sediment. So it's kind of interesting, just soil getting pushed into there. So a lot of people have started adding riparian buffers on creek sides or fields to kind of keep the soil where it's supposed to be and keep the topsoil there. So it's going to grow better crops anyway. So it makes sense to do that. We talked about the GPS mounting. A couple other research things that just took time and took research to find out. Frost-free dates on planting, that came from the research to know what time to wait to plant your stuff to make sure you didn't get a frost on it. The Hessian fly-free dates for your wheat crops, it's after that certain date to avoid when the Hessian flies hatch and damage the crops. So different things like that. I mean, it just takes time in collecting that research and figuring out different ways to manage it. The technology has made it a lot safer products for farmers handling it and for consumers. We know more about the herbicides now. We know more about some of the chemicals that are out there. We know how to handle it better, what to use it for. We've got it down to where people don't have to use them as much because of better management practices. So it's really neat to think about how far we've come in just a short time, really. We talked about how the cattle have changed. A lot of them going into that were just better breeding, improved genetics. If you try to develop a better animal and improve on that, but we've got the connections now. You can talk to more people. We can go to different sales and things like that to improve the genetic lines. The same thing goes for plants. You don't really think about plant breeding, but there's huge operations in Illinois where all they're doing are breeding different genetic lines, and you get disease resistance, insect resistance. And all that means is it's a better crop that's not going to be damaged, and more food for people to eat in the long run. So that's kind of the gist of that. I'm trying to think. I did want to mention on the wheat stuff too. John was talking about that before. It's kind of interesting. If you don't drive through it, you may not always notice it, but I'm trying to think how you were talking about the wheat.
We're talking about
production of it.
Production, storage.
Well, I guess it's just changed a lot since then. Typically now, instead of just raising it for the actual wheat seed, people make straw out of it, but it's managed so much closer now. It's usually in a three crop rotation. So you might have corn come in the spring, so planting corn about this time of year. After you combine the corn, the wheat comes in, it's a winter wheat in this area. Plant it in the fall, it goes through the fall and winter time. So in the spring, you have a straw harvest, you have a wheat harvest, then you can come back with soybeans that next year. And it really times it really well. And kind of the part you don't think about with that, it really prevents a lot of disease. If you go corn to corn or beans to beans, if you go too many years, there's too many insects that come in. So there's a lot of management practices that people are doing now that didn't used to be done, and it's really paid off. Okay. Just a couple last slides here. I thought this was another infographic that was pretty interesting here. But in the last 30 years, corn farmers have cut erosion by 67%. They've reduced irrigation by 53%, decreased land use per bushel by 30%, lowered energy use per bushel by 43%, lessened greenhouse gas emissions by 36%, and increased production by 101%. So they're doing a good job, right? Doing an awfully good job. So, and I guess looking forward to the future, I know you all had mentioned global warming as a topic to talk on. UK recognizes it more as a climate change, the climate change discussion. unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data yet. There is research going on right now. They actually have a pasture field, and they've got heaters blowing on the grass, trying to see what increased temperatures is going to do. Do we need to plant earlier? Do we need to, are we going to have to start watering more like they do in Oregon, bring in irrigation for hay and pasture fields? So they're doing research on a lot of that stuff right now. We don't have a lot of data on it currently. So I guess I can't touch on it super well, but there's not a lot of research-based information out there. It's difficult because you probably have initial results from experiments, but there's not as much accuracy if you're going off of one trial as you go off of 100 trials and collect all that data and compare it all. So I'm kind of just a little note to end on. I thought this kind of hit it home. Despite all of our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. So I'll take any questions, and thank you so much for having us tonight.
Actually, I think that's it.
I got a final.
All right.
I want to thank you and the rest of the Historical Society organization for keeping us posted as to what possibly we can have had and look forward to.
Well, thank you very much. And I think what they told us is some good news, because when I asked them to foretell the future of agriculture in Boone County, which was part of that, I thought it was going to be doomsday. I thought that, farming as a livelihood would be ended. But you've given us hope.
Good, that's what I'm here for.
You have given us excellent information, and I'm just blown away by the research that you've been presenting to us. It's great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming.